Okay. Namaste. I'm Dr. Suhas Kshirsagar, and on behalf of the Chopra Foundation, I welcome all of you to the longevity experiment. We're experiencing some technical issues, and we'll have all our speakers back, and we'll continue with our discussion about the quest for longevity. What I would like to share with all of you today is the Vedic understanding of longevity and a long, healthy, fulfilling life, as we call it. And one of the most important things that when we talk about longevity is really understanding it from a contextual perspective. As we are starting this wonderful course on longevity, I would like to do a Vedic invocation, which will allow us to connect to the thread of wholeness, as we call it. If you want, take a nice deep moment of pause, silence, allow yourselves to be centered and quiet. And I'm going to do a short Vedic invocation. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Hari Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And I'm going to translate this Shanti mantra to all of you. What it simply means is Asatoma Sadgamaya. It means lead us all from untruth to the eternal truth. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. It simply means lead us all from the dullness and the darkness of ignorance to the radiant light of knowledge. And the most important being Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Lead us all from mortality to immortality. And I think Ayurveda, as we know, which is the most ancient and most comprehensive science of healthcare that is known to humanity, the very mission statement of Ayurveda is Ayurvedo Amritana, Ayurveda for immortality. And a medical science which talks about this as a mission statement to really understand and connect your mortal self with your immortal self. And that's the whole journey of evolution. And in a few minutes, Deepak is going to give us a wonderful journey into the whole science of consciousness. Because what we know for sure is that we create our bodies on a daily basis from the experience of our world. And that's the reason why Ayurveda is simply science of life. And as our body is simply a composition of energy and information that actually comes from the infinite field of this consciousness that surrounds us, the energy and the information field. And we are literally exchanging that and borrowing that intelligence to keep us alive. The exchange that happens to keep us alive through food, air, through water. That we nourish not only our organs, organ systems, cells, tissues, right down to the genetic level. And the biochemistry, the neurochemistry, we make such a big fuss about really going to the depth of understanding an enzyme, a molecule, this and that. But as we know that this whole field of the juices and the fountains and the liquids in the body are the mere product of awareness, of our belief systems, thoughts and emotions to a greater extent, and the perception of the world as we see and as we witness. Since we are discussing about longevity itself, we need to look at all of this from this perspective that what we take in is who we become. And do we have an ability to buffer that, to distill that, to transform that, to regulate that? And I think that is the very key. There are numerous...
People can't watch the video, they can only hear the sound.
There are numerous things that we often talk about from a medical perspective, that we talk about a magical molecule, maybe a test, maybe a gene, maybe some kind of a testing that you're doing to understand. But from a Vedic and especially the Vedantic perspective, we talk about who you are and your cosmic self. your immortal self, which is at the background, watching, witnessing everything. And the scenery of what is happening that you're witnessing could be of aging, could be of sickness, could be of death, dying, sin. But the seer, the Atma, the field of consciousness behind that is completely immune and immortal to any of this change as you go through the quagmire of life. And I think this is a big differentiating point that we'll be discussing, because we should be doing both of these things. The complexity of aging is about your genetics plus about what happens within your environment. And we can understand genetics to maybe 20-25% of the probability. But the epigenetics and the epigenome of how you experience and what you do is even more important, because we should not be just dwelling on the mask and the clumps of matter that we are trying to look, but we have to uncover the energetic reality of our body itself. And that's the reason that when we look at it from an Ayurvedic or even Vedic perspective, they have actually talked about at this where the mortality of life and the immortality of life is related to your perspective, your spiritual journey. And as you are engaging into your spiritual journey, you are slowly becoming healthier and happier at the same time. We often say health is a byproduct of enlightenment. And I think that's the journey that we are trying to do. There's a mantra that we often say, and Eddie can talk more about it later, where we invoke this Mahamrityunjay mantra. Mrityu means death and mortality. And Mahamrityunjay mantra is all about conquering death and connecting yourself with immortality. So when we talk about that Mahamrityunjay mantra, which says Om Trambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiv Bandhanan Mrityor Mukshiya Mamruta. So connecting with the field of Shiva and the consciousness, which help us dispel the fear of death, sickness, misery, and mortality, and slowly help us dispel the illusion and the veil of Maya, which creates a lot of sickness and suffering. So we have to play both hands, one from a spiritual perspective to leading an awakened life, to an enlightened life. And we have to constantly work on all the factors that are going to be nourishing our life itself. Because we are going to talk about Hitayu and Ahitayu. Hitayu is all the factors that are going to be nourishing, and they are going to de-accelerate the process of aging. And Ahitayu are all the non-beneficial activities and choices that you make, which actually accelerate your aging process. And when we look at the Vedic perspective of aging, it actually is very, very clear. It doesn't talk about the cells that are dying or they are forgetting their replication or genes that are misbehaving. It actually talks about something very, very simple. And there are some very unique sutras or quotations from the Vedic perspective. One from Atharva Veda, which is the body of Vedic wisdom and literature, and other is Yajurveda, which are the main Vedas as we call them. And they have a beautiful Sanskrit sutra, which I would be happy to share. As we are starting our journey into decoding longevity, it will be very interesting. Pardon me for my Sanskrit here. And the one from Atharva Veda, it says, Pashyema Sharadha Shatam, Jivema Sharadha Shatam, Buddhema Sharadha Shatam, Rohema Sharadha Shatam, Pushema Sharadha Shatam. What it simply means is, may we live through 100 autumns. May the light of our eyes remain clear for 100 years. May we have a stable intellect for 100 years. May we continue to learn and grow for 100 years. And may we continue to nurture and be in service for 100 years. This is from Atharva Veda. From Yajurveda, from a Vedic perspective, it's even more clear. Pashyema Sharadha Shatam, Jivema Sharadha Shatam, Shrunuyama Sharadha Shatam, Prabhravam Sharadha Shatam, Adinasyama Sharadha Satam, Bhuyashta Sharadha Shatam. What it means is sun, which is the giver of life, rises in the east, and may we be able to see the sunlight for 100 years, may be able to be live well for 100 years, maybe we be able to hear and listen for 100 years, maybe be able to speak and communicate clearly for 100 years, maybe avoid any kind of dependence on anyone. May our sensory and motor organs serve us well for 100 years and beyond. The point I'm trying to highlight here is it's more than just the wrinkles on the skin. It's just not the youthful vitality, but the clarity of the senses and the stability of the intellect is the ultimate destination or the journey that we should all be striving. And I'm going to invite Deepak and all other eminent speakers hereafter who are going to give us not only the tools, but the techniques how to get there. So let me invite Dr. Deepak Chopra.
Thank you, Suhas ji. Thank you, Sheila Patel. Thank you, Eddie Stern. Thank you, Dr. Ara. Um, we have now launched the longevity experiment, and some people are having technical issues, but the problem is probably on your side because everyone is telling me right now in the feedback that you can see and hear clearly. In any case, this is our first webinar, so be patient. We are resolving the technical issues and we are learning. And this is going to be a long journey and an exciting adventure. So thank you for joining us. Dr. Suhas has given you an overview of the aspirations of, um, of Ayurvedic healing and the Ayurvedic philosophy. And you will be getting a very proper course in due time on the Ayurvedic aspects of longevity. From Eddie Stern, you will be learning amazing breathing techniques that are based on the idea that you count your life not in years, but the number of breaths you take in a lifetime. And that in itself is a very empowering idea because we can control our breathing, and therefore through the breathing, metabolism, and lots of things that are happening in our body. Dr. Suppiah, Dr. Ara Suppiah, they're all going to speak for a few moments, is going to talk about mitochondrial health. Mitochondria are our aspects of our native intelligence in every cell. Mitochondria have RNA in them, and the genetic activity of mitochondria comes only through our mothers. It's this mitochondria is the Shakti of a cell. And so you'll hear about that from both a Western perspective, but we'll correlate it with our Eastern perspectives of Purusha, which is pure consciousness, and Shakti, which is the activation of consciousness. And corresponding correlate of that physically is the mitochondria in your cells. Dr. Sheila Patel, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Chopra Global and has been involved with every program Chopra has done, is going to correlate from both a Western and Eastern perspective, not only Ayurveda, but what we learn about epigenetics and genetics. And I will do my best to bring everything together, because ultimately Ayurveda and everything we do is a consciousness-based understanding of the human body. So right now, as the Western sciences look at the human body, they look at it in physical terms. When I went to medical school, first lesson is anatomy. But then you realize, when you're looking at a dead body, you realize there's something missing. The body is not anatomical, it's a process. And the process is non-stop from the day you were born. Actually, from the day you became a fertilized egg and a zygote and an embryo, a baby, toddler, right up to now, the body is a process. It's not a noun, it's a verb. So when you go to medical school, first thing is anatomy. You look at the body as a noun, as a thing. then you realize it's a process, and it's a non-stop process being governed by our daily experience of life: eating, breathing, digestion, metabolism, elimination, the experience of the world through the five senses, but also what's happening in our inner world: thoughts and feelings and emotions and memories and desires and aspirations and longingness and intuition and creativity and inspiration and higher consciousness and transcendence. So the body is a non-stop process that is metabolizing experience into what we call the physical appearance of the body. But the physical appearance of the body is just that: it is a physical appearance, because the body is not physical. The body is a perceptual activity in our consciousness, and we give it the idea that it's physical, that it's an object, but actually the body is an experience, and you're having that experience in your own consciousness. So as we go through, Dr. Suhas will be dealing with this in much more detail, but that experience that we call the physical body is generated in consciousness, it is known in consciousness, it is interpreted in consciousness. But here's the funny thing: it's made out of consciousness. The experience is made out of consciousness. The experience of the physical body is a perceptual activity in consciousness. How do you know you have a body? Well, you can experience your own body through the five senses. So your body is a perceptual activity. But where is that activity happening? In consciousness, not in the brain. There's no sound in the brain, there's no color in the brain, there's no text. Well, there's no sensation in the brain. In fact, the brain is impervious to its own sensations. So the brain does not experience anything. The brain records the correlates, the biological or neural correlates of experience. And we interpret these experiences as the physical body. So when Ayurveda looks at this interpretation, the perceptual activity in human consciousness of experience, it calls it sthul sharir, or physical body, but with the total understanding that what we are calling physical is an appearance as physical, but it's a perceptual activity. And this body is made of matter and energy, food, or as we call prana. You'll learn a lot from Dr. Suhas about this. But then there is something else, an experience in the body. We call it the subtle body. Why do we call it the subtle body? Because we can't see it, but we can experience it. We experience our subtle body, which is invisible, as thoughts, as emotions, as mental activity, as intellect, as ego. And therefore, even though the subtle body is invisible, it's a direct experience in our consciousness, just as the way the so called physical body is a direct experience in the body. So, going back to medical school anatomy and then physiology, what is the body? And the body is a process. And from the Ayurvedic perspective, that process is occurring in consciousness and is made out of consciousness. Just as the physical body is the perceptual activity of consciousness, the subtle body is a mental activity of consciousness. Different vibrations of what are called vrittis. So one set of vrittis gives us the experience of a physical body, changing physical body. Another set of vrittis, another frequency of vrittis, gives us the experience of what we call the subtle body. And then there's something called the causal body, which is Jiva, Atma, Brahman. You learn about this, but this causal body is actually the seed of both the subtle body and the physical body. And you learn a lot about it. What is the causal body made of? Sanskaras and vasanas, and but all modifications of consciousness. Everything is a modification of consciousness. Now, going back to medical school, physiology had a hint of that, but it wasn't complete. But then, as you go to medical school, the third lesson you learn is biochemistry. So everything that is a process can be explained through biomolecules. What are biomolecules? They are human names for experiences in consciousness. How do you know there's a molecule? You look at it under a microscope, or you find out some way it's an experience. So even the biomolecules are modes of knowing and experience in consciousness, modified form of consciousness. And then we go beyond this in medical school, is something that we learn is called biophysics. Now, suddenly, all those chemical exchanges are broken down into physical laws, the movement not only of atoms but particles and waves that are correlated with each other. So, biochemistry is physics. And then you ask, say, what is physics? And then you say, well, the way they do physics, at least theoretical physics, is mathematics. So then now we have gone even beyond anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, biophysics. We end up with math. What is math? It's an activity in human consciousness looking at the regularities of experience. That's all it is, mathematics. So we can map out the body at many levels: anatomical, physiological, biochemical, biophysical, mathematical. But do understand that all these entities, mathematics, biochemistry, physiology, biophysics, anatomy, are human names for modes of knowing and experience in consciousness. Therefore, we can understand the body as anatomical, physiological, biochemical, biophysical, mathematical, but do understand that ultimately the body is made out of consciousness. And all these different layers of the body are modifications of consciousness called vrittis. You can call them modulations, vrittis, fluctuations, shaktis, movements. It doesn't matter the name. Once we understand that body is made of consciousness and consciousness is a field of infinite possibilities, consciousness is creative, it's self-regulating, it's self-organizing, it's self-evolving, then everything you will learn in this body, in this whole series, is the deeper understanding that what we call total well-being, and ultimately that translates into longevity, is an integrated, unified activity of body, mind, and spirit. But spirit, being consciousness, is also body, mind, and that integrated activity has only one goal, and that is self regulation, which we call homeostasis in Western scientific understanding. So, all healing ultimately is a return to homeostasis, which is our fundamental state. So, we can say the healing response. In medical school, we learn about the, the nervous system, gastrointestinal system, immune system, endocrine system, but actually, there's only one system, and it's called the healing system. And that healing system has only one goal: return the body to its fundamental state of self regulation. And what is the ultimate ground of self regulation? Consciousness. Consciousness is the self regulator of the entire universe. Okay? The whole universe is evolving, the whole universe is self regulating. What we call the laws of nature are mathematical constructs for regularities of experience in consciousness, regularities of experience. So you learn about these regularities again from Dr. Suhas, other people, daily and seasonal routines, and much, much more. Regularities of experience that help us match the biological rhythms of the body with cosmic rhythms. So your body is a symphony, it's part of the symphony of the universe, and we call it universe because it's one song, universe. So I'll stop here. Today is a very introductory webinar to give you the basis of what we will be discussing. I'm seeing a lot of questions. We'll hold on to these questions. Today was our first introduction to this area. We will be answering all your questions. You can also email your questions. You can use this website to give your own ideas, share your own ideas, create your own blogs if you want. With that, I'd like Sheila to say just, we must end in 10 minutes or so. So, Sheila, in 2 minutes, tell us what you're going to be sharing with us in this series.
Thank you, Deepak. So yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this longevity experiment. And now that we've sort of created the context, what I like to share is bringing it down to the practical for people. What are these practices that we can have that, as Deepak mentioned, encourage self-regulation? And you'll see in a lot of the tips and practices that I talk about in the videos, it really breaks it down into, again, as he mentioned, we really have to address body and balancing that and the body self-regulating mind and spirit. And it's very interesting that in the science of longevity, all of the science right now, depending on the particular researcher, they're looking at all of these different aspects and how they affect longevity. And absolutely, we need physical practices that's where the body can self-regulate. We also need to pay attention to happiness and joy and our emotions and keep that mind self-regulated. And with the ultimate goal then of experiencing already our immortal selves. And that's, again, what I like to share is what are those practices? What can we do to facilitate self-regulation and homeostasis so that we can not only have long lives, but healthy lives? And I, as a practicing physician, I know it's one of the things everyone's concerned about, not just living long, but happy, healthy lives, and ones where we don't suffer. And with the practices we share, that's all very possible. And so those are the things I like to share on my videos, and in the context of all of the pillars of our health and well-being, that we can bring the practices in. So that's what I'll be sharing, and a lot of the science.
So every week you'll be getting at least one longevity practice from each one of us. We are starting that. Then we'll be doing the webinars. We'll be answering your questions, and we'll be developing a proper curriculum as well. All of us. Dr. Suhas will lead the curriculum from Ayurveda. I'll talk more about consciousness, and the rest of the faculty will bring their insights as well. So before we go, Eddie, you want to share why breath is so important in regulating our biology?
Certainly. So thank you. It's a real honor to be here with this amazing group of people for the longevity experiment. Deepak briefly touched on the concept of the 5 bodies that we find in yoga. We have our physical body, which is kind of the smallest one. Then we have a more expanded body, which is the body of prana, or within us, it's breath. More expanded than that is the body of mind. More expanded than that is the body of the intellect. And then encompassing the entire manifestation or universe is the body of bliss, or ananda. And the ananda comes from ananta, which means unlimited. So our largest being is a being without any limitation. Somehow that becomes refined a little into the intellect, which is right knowledge about things, when we understand things rightly. And then somehow the intellect becomes a little condensed into what's called the manas, or the mind, where our knowledge becomes fractured, it becomes limited. And this is where stress and misunderstanding and emotional disturbances and confusion begins to set in, the level of the mental body, the manomaya. And then the manomaya, this fractured or limited understanding in the mind, begins to disturb the prana, our breath. It starts to hit against the breath and the channels that the breath travels through. And as the breath gets disturbed, it then ends up going into the end or receiving organs of the nervous system, where it settles in as disease. So in the yoga practices, what they say is that if you want to begin to give yourself vibrant health, you have to do things with your body, but you also have to do things with your breath. because through smoothing the breath and refining the breath and steadying the breath, you are going to stabilize the level of mind where stress begins to occur. And when the mind becomes stable, then we can access the intellect where we gain right knowledge about things. And when we have right knowledge about things, then we can perceive our unlimited nature and merge back into a state of all-knowing. So we will be doing breathing practices in order to calm the nervous system and begin to smooth out the fluctuations that are occurring where stress occurs at the level of mind. So I'll be doing one simple practice a week to try to move us in that direction.
Dr. Ara, Suppiah, can you share with us what you'll be teaching here and what is mitochondrial health?
Looks like we lost Dr. Ara from the screen for a moment. He dropped out.
Yeah, Ara, you're not on the screen. Can you please come on the screen? Okay, we'll wait for Dr. Ara to come on the screen. But so far, what we've heard is that what we call the physical body is the conceptual body. It's also called the karmic body, which is the projection of karma, which means memories, stories, choices, and interpretations of the past, meaning, context, relationship that project as our body. So, Dr. Ara, can you come on board? But before we're still waiting for Dr. Ara. And as you know, this is the first time we are doing this. We're still sorting out some technical issues. But Dr. Suhas, would you like to conclude now with a little deeper understanding of what people might have understood from our comments? And I'm hoping that Dr. Ara can join.
Thank you, Deepak. So I think this has been a fascinating exchange, and what you laid out is the real foundation of understanding what goes way beyond the matter that is perceived by our senses itself. So connecting yourself with higher states of awareness and consciousness is the step, because it all boils down to graceful aging, and I would like to call it as graceful saging, where you create a sage-like mentality and start leading what we call it as an enlightened life. So I'm glad Dr. Ara is back, and let me ask Dr. Ara that please share with what you're going to do with all of us for the longevity experiment, the techniques, tools.
So first of all, I'm extremely grateful to be part of this group. My work for this experiment is coming from my background of working with high level athletes, and again, having spent a lot of time with them, it comes down to the fundamentals. As Deepak said, the mitochondria, which I've spent a lot of time studying and understanding. When you look at it, it's reduced down to the source of energy in a cell. Okay, and in Ayurveda, in the science of life, we are an energetic being. So understanding the mitochondria is essential. But what's less known about the mitochondria, for instance, is the fact that the mitochondria absorbs and emits light. So one of the most profound sayings I've heard from my yoga teacher is, the light in me sees the light in you. So when you talk about Shakti, the mother in me sees the mother in you. So the mitochondria is so essential to the understanding of the overall energetic person. So I'll be sharing tips on how to maximize mitochondrial function, both in terms of its density and also its function itself, the efficiency itself. So that's what I'll be sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Ara. And before we conclude, I'm just looking at some comments. And some comments, they say, are you saying there's no physical body? I can't get my head around the fact that the body is a mistake. No, no, no. What we're saying is the body is a concept and is experienced as physical, but its innate nature is that it is a perceptual activity. Therefore, it's a modification of consciousness. We never said the body is a mistake. It's the way you experience is misinterpreted by the intellect. So we do say the intellect makes mistakes because it interprets perceptual activity as reality. But perceptual activity is basically a magical lie because it's totally inaccurate. First of all, we have a narrow band of perceptual activity based to us on the five senses and the limitation of the senses. But furthermore, every perceptual activity is a magical lie. You look at the ground, it looks flat. Nobody believes that. You think you're standing on stationary ground and it's spinning at dizzying speeds and hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour. The body appears to be physical, but it's not physical. So I've answered at least one question today. Uh, I would like to conclude today's session. And yes, we'll try and make this available for you so you can look. A lot of people are asking, can we see this again? We'll make sure that you can. Dr. Suhasji, can you end with any shloka or any conclusion in Sanskrit and explain it? And then we'll see. People also ask, is this going to be the same time every week? No, we'll be announcing in advance. And we'll also be talking about the topics that we're discussing. Suhasji, let's conclude.
Thank you. I'll do a short Vedic invocation and tell you the meaning of that in a very short manner. It says, Om Bhadram Karnebhish Puniyama Devaha Bhadram Pashchimakshibhirya Jatra Sthirairanga Stushtu Vansasthanubihi Yashema Devahitam Yadaj. Let my eyes see the goodness in everything. Let my ears hear all the noble thoughts around it. Let my every sense ingest only the goodness from every experience that I see. And let me create my body from all the exchange of the interactions and how I feel healthy and happy with that experience. So let's have that aspiration for today as we conclude this wonderful webinar. Namaste.
Thank you. It all
Thank
starts
you.
with aspiration and onward with the new adventure. We'll be in touch about the next webinar very soon. Suhasji, thank you. Sheila, thank you. Ara, thank you. Eddie, thank you. And all of you joining us.
Thank you,
Thank
Deepak.
you so much.
Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Suhas.